Thank you all for joining us for this month's Best Practices webinar. And I'm really pleased to have with me on the line today Dan Floen, who's the president and founder of PM2. And he's been a partner with eMaint for many years. And Dan is no stranger to this industry. He's been in this industry actually as long as eMaint's been in business, around 30 years in materials management and process control and industrial distribution. And Dan launched, for those of you that don't know Dan, he launched PM2, which is a somewhat unique organization in that they're sort of a full-service inventory management company. And I know I recognize many of you on the line, and Dan has worked and helped many eMaint clients as well as others with, some of their issues regarding inventory management. And so Dan has put together, this is a topic that is kind of new to eMaint, and I'm glad you folks were able to join us today. And before I turn things over to Dan to get the show started, I just wanted to cover a few quick things. We are recording today's session, so for those of you that want to share this with others on your team that might work different schedules, we'll share a link to the recording. Dan's presentation, he said, will be around 25-30 minutes, and then he's agreed to stay as long as he needs to answer any questions. So please feel free and type any questions at any point during Dan's presentation into the questions feature on GoToWebinar, and I'll go ahead and read them to Dan at the conclusion of the presentation. Also, Dan has agreed to make a PDF of his slides available, and we'll have a poll at the end of the inventory where you can just request those slides, a little checkbox. So we encourage you to do that. So without further ado, Dan, I'm going to turn things over to you.
All right. Thank you, Rona. Appreciate everyone joining us today. Well, as Rona mentioned, this is a bit of a new topic, and it's centered around the most common concerns that I've been hearing lately. With businesses seeking to do more and more with less and less, many businesses are choosing to downsize their MRO storeroom staff and sometimes even eliminate it entirely. So that's leaving the maintenance technicians oftentimes to kind of fend for themselves and manage the inventory on their own. Now, in rare cases I've seen this transition goes well, but more often than not, the MRO inventory quickly degrades, costing the company dearly in lost maintenance productivity, increased downtime, and rising MRO purchasing spend coming from that attitude of a just-in-time buying mentality. So I wrote this topic today coming out of the #1 concern that we hear from companies. And that is that they're concerned that after they build this storeroom inventory environment, that they're doubting that they're going to be able to maintain the environment after it's all set up and they flip the switch on the system. That's the #1 most frequent question I get. How are we going to sustain this when you leave or when we finish setting this up? So today's session is all about putting forth the critical success factors to help you sustain that world-class inventory environment that you built or you worked with a partner to have built. So before we dive in too far, I did have one poll question I wanted to start with, and here it is. And Rona, if you want to start that.
Sure. So I just launched a poll, and for our listeners out there, your responses will be anonymous, but just to give Dan an idea of where you are in this process, tell us which of these best describes your current MRO inventory environment. Again, there's no wrong answers. This will just be done as a group instant poll. So let us know if you consider yourselves world-class and highly effective in your current MRO environment. Or maybe you have a storeroom and procedures, but you're not executing in a consistent manner. Or maybe you feel your storeroom or processes needs to be reestablished for the reasons Dan described that he often hears. Or maybe, and I know many of our eMaint clients tell us this, they start with a system and they want to set up a storeroom. They don't really have a storeroom for their spare parts yet. It's a goal. So let us know which one best describes you. Looks like, Dan, we've had 85%. I'll leave it open a couple more seconds. Let people cast their vote. All right, looks like most people have voted, so let me go and share that with you. And Dan, what we're hearing is 3% consider themselves to be world class. 38% say they have a storeroom, but they're not executing consistently.
Okay.
That's the highest response. 28% say storeroom or processes need to be reestablished, and 31% say they're starting from scratch. Okay, so let me go ahead and turn it back to you, Dan.
Okay, thanks, Rona. And interesting. It's very, I think, very indicative of the audiences that we go out and see, the responses that we saw on the poll questions here. So thanks for your input there. And it just, I think, solidifies why this topic made sense today. Well, I'll start with my version of a quote from a book by Pastor Rick Warren. He wrote a book, as many of you know, called The Purpose-Driven Life. What on earth am I here for? And in his book, he says the church is a body, not a building, an organism, not an organization. Now, Rick Warren was talking about the church, but I think this can also be applied to your business and your team. Your business is a body, not a building. Your team is an organism, not an organization. If you treated your business as if it were a body to be cared for instead of a building to be maintained, or a team as an organism to be nurtured instead of an organization to be managed, just imagine what the difference would be in your corporate culture and the level of performance you'd achieve. Rick Warren also writes, for the organs of your body to fulfill their purpose, they must be connected to your body. If an organ is somehow severed from its body, it will shrivel and die. And I might add that that body may be probably going to be a little less healthy as well for the lack of that organ. Just as in your body, every member of a healthy team has a purpose, and they are missed when they're gone. Look at any successful sports team. Take the New England Patriots just as an example. I think it's interesting how sports announcers refer to the New England Patriots organization as opposed to how they refer to the Patriots football team. There's definitely a different connotation in the use of those two terms, isn't there? The New England Patriots organization, headed up by Robert Kraft, sounds very large and impersonal, doesn't it? I'm guessing there are a lot of people in the organization who don't know the names of the folks just 3 cubicles down from them. But contrast that with the way sports announcers talk about the Patriots football team. The team has something special, don't they? Not the least of which is maybe some deflated footballs. But I bet those guys are all on a first name basis. There are some deep relationships on that team and a lot of trust and mutual respect. And if any member of the team is absent from the field on a particular play, the team's odds of success on that play are greatly diminished. Every member on that team knows their job, and they know how their role impacts the success of the team. Now, I could probably stop right here, because if you were to live out this concept of your team being an organism and not an organization, and you nurtured that organism, your team would be highly successful, and your MRO inventory environment would be second to none. Now, this team concept of organism versus organization applies to any team or business, but let me share some practical tools and concepts that are specifically aimed at sustaining an effective MRO inventory environment. Allow me to present to you the 4 pillars of sustainability. These 4 pillars apply to any effective work team, but today we'll put them in a context of sustaining effective MRO inventory. The 4 pillars are educate, empower, equip, and excel. Now, before we dive any deeper into the 4 pillars, I have one last poll question for today that I wanted to try to get your response to, and here it is.
Okay. Here's the poll question that Dan is asking, and if you don't mind giving us your response, what currently best describes your management of MRO inventory? Who's managing it? Do you have 24/7 storeroom attendants? Your storeroom is manned, but first shift only? Do you have a third party that manages your storeroom? Or perhaps you have a secure storeroom, but you're in a self-serve environment? Or the last one is it a free-for-all? So hopefully you can tell us which of those 5, one of those should describe. I think they cover the full range of the spectrum here. And hopefully Dan's insights today will be something that you can take back to your team if you're in any of those 5 categories. All right, looks like we have the votes are in. Oh, a couple more. Let's leave it here for a few seconds. All right, so let me go and share the results. So Dan, what our listeners are saying, 7% have a storeroom that's manned 24/7. I imagine a few years ago we might have seen rather different responses. 15% are saying it's manned, but just during the first shift. Only 1% has third-party management of their storeroom. Interesting, 48%, nearly half, have a secured but self-serve storeroom, and 28% say they're in the free-for-all category. All right, back to you, Dan.
Okay, thanks, Rona. Very interesting indeed. Of course, the concepts we're talking about here apply to wherever you might be on that spectrum, but I can see that based on the results and your responses that there's, I think, going to be a lot of direct application to help those that are managing their inventory, particularly in a self-serve environment or a free-for-all type environment, to get to the next level there. So thank you. Well, let's continue with the 4 pillars then. The first pillar of sustainability is educate. Now, educating your team is a critical step in laying a solid foundation for the team to succeed. Unfortunately, this is often overlooked or glossed over. In traditional management environments, the most frequent management strategy I hear is to set stringent policies in place, complete with well-defined consequences for non-compliance, and then hold employees accountable for those outcomes using fear of retribution or even loss of their job as a lever. It's just their job to follow the policies, I hear managers say. This is usually followed by, if they don't want to follow the rules, they can find somewhere else to work. Well, that might work for a time, but the trouble with this management versus labor mentality is that it is simply not sustainable long term. Managers using this strategy are constantly chasing after and disciplining non-compliant employees. And if they actually follow through on their threats, turnover and new hire indoctrinations are a constant burden for management. And I want to present to you today that there is a better way to do this, and it's to build a high performance work team. And it starts with educating the team. Jim Collins wrote a book called Good to Great, and he uses a metaphor of a flywheel to illustrate the value of building a high performance work team. Now, you engineering and production folks on the phone today know that a flywheel produces a tremendous amount of power once it achieves a high rate of speed. Once the flywheel is up to speed, it only takes a fraction of the energy that was required to get it up to speed to keep the flywheel spinning, and that's the point. The truth is, building a high-performance work team is going to take a lot of energy on the front end, and I guess that's the bad news. But the power that the team will produce and the energy that you will save managing the team moving forward will exponentially outweigh your investment up front. The key points I want to highlight for you here today on this slide are, number one, cast the vision. Secondly, define what success looks like for your team. Third, conduct team development training. And fourth, define how each person's role impacts the team. And last but not least, conduct inventory 101 training. You know, members of a high-performance work team, as Jim Collins says, they value the success of the team over their own personal gain. And there is tremendous power in that. So I really want you to think about that and give it the priority that it really deserves. The first item is really to cast the vision. Somewhere in the Bible it says, where there is no vision, the people perish. This is ever so true today. People need to know where they're going, what they're building, and why. They need to know that their hard work is getting them somewhere, something more than just a paycheck. Perhaps some of you have heard the story of the 3 bricklayers, but I want to tell it again today because it really illustrates this point of casting a vision. It goes something like this. A man came upon a construction site where 3 bricklayers were working. He asked the first, "What are you doing?" And the man replied, "I'm laying bricks." He asked the second, "What are you doing?" And the man replied, "I'm building a wall." As he approached the third, he heard him humming a tune as he worked, and he asked him, "What are you doing?" The man stood, looked up at the sky, and smiled. "I am building a great cathedral to the glory of our God," he said. Now, which one of those guys caught the vision, do you think? Don't leave vision to chance. Define it clearly and speak it plainly and boldly. I put some examples on this slide of what casting a vision might sound like in your company as it relates to effective inventory management. Notice that these vision statements are all spoken in the present tense. If our conversation is in the present, our actions will likely be in the present as well. Let's look at these statements together. First one is, working as a team, we manage a highly effective MRO inventory environment which drives efficiencies in our work and reduces the company's maintenance cost overall. Wow, isn't that what we're after right there? Secondly, all of our team members are fully enrolled and committed to the team's success. Or the last one there is, outstanding team member performance is recognized publicly and celebrated. These are the kind of statements that are aimed at motivating your team to succeed and really building a culture of success and sustainability. Once you've clearly cast the vision, it's just as important to define what success looks like for your team. How will they know when things are going well? What indicators should they be watching for? For the bricklayer who was building that great cathedral, success might have been defined by the sound of a majestic pipe organ or the huge choir singing, or maybe it was defined by the many thousands of people who are going to come and visit and worship there. For your inventory management team, success might look something like this: 100% team member enrollment, 98% inventory accuracy, 100% process performance, less than X% stockouts, less than X% downtime. I want you to notice in the first bullet there that I use the term enrollment. I didn't say buy-in. The term buy-in would seem to imply that the person might have been sold a bill of goods. The term enroll implies that a person signed up voluntarily because they caught the vision and they wanted to be a part of the team and make a contribution. People that don't see the vision or believe it will not enroll to be a part of the team. If you're having difficulty gaining enrollment, check your vision and re-communicate it. Once you have a group of fully enrolled team members, they'll be ready and often eager to receive training to become more valuable to the team. A good place to start is to help each team member answer the question, who am I? In other words, what is their personality profile? I'm sure several of you here on the call today have taken tests like the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI test, or the DISC Personality Profile Assessment, or something similar. These assessments are aimed at helping us understand what our personality preferences are. Just as importantly, it's good to know your teammates' personality types so that you can communicate effectively with them. The next question to unwrap for the individual is, who am I being? In this process, we talk about how life occurs in a conversation, and we evaluate our conversations to see who we're being. Are we living in the past or speaking into the future? Is our cup half empty or half full? We learn that the size of our relationship with someone is in direct proportion with the size of the request we can make of that person. We learn that the possibilities and actions live only in the present and the future, never in the past. And we learn that in a trusting environment where the team shares the same vision and goals, straight talk is not only welcome, but expected. During the training process, you'll clearly define how each person's role impacts the success of the team. For example, what happens and who is impacted when I pull a part from stock without issuing it out in the system? Or what happens and who is impacted when I return a used part to stock? And last but not least, conduct Inventory 101 training for the team. This is especially critical in the case where those of you who responded that you have a self-serve environment where technicians are managing that space. Your technicians are most likely not trained in inventory management. So giving them at least a basic understanding of fundamental inventory practices will go a long way to make your team successful. Inventory 101 training would touch on things such as housekeeping, cycle counts, stocking to the back and picking from the front, putting away all receipts the same day. Just standard basic operating principles that they can follow day to day. You might also consider sending your team members through APIX courses. You might have heard of APIX. APIX is a professional association for supply chain and operations management, and they offer a host of courses and certifications that you can provide for your people. The second pillar of sustainability is empower. Now, by now your team members are already enrolled, so now it's time to give them something to sink their teeth into. Take a look at your inventory management process and assign ownership to each team member for a specific piece of the process. This is not to say that they're the only one who are going to perform their assigned piece of the process. It's really about ownership. If I own the cycle count process, for example, and I believe it's a valuable part of the whole process, I'm going to make sure that my teammates do cycle counts regularly and consistently. One way to ensure ownership is to involve the team members in the design of the process from the start. Then it's the team's process, not yours. As long as the team delivers the business results you need, don't get caught up in the details of the design. Allow them to be creative and make mistakes and learn from them. Foster a notion of self-directed high-performance work team. Build the team up, encourage and promote their ideas, show your confidence in them by giving them responsibility, and be sure to help them celebrate their successes. A wise friend once told me, people don't mind change, they just don't like being changed. Embrace the energy of a fully empowered team and you'll begin to see the flywheel turning. The third pillar of sustainability is equip. Now that your team is educated and empowered, you need to equip them for success. That bricklayer needed a good trowel, the right mix of mortar, and a string line to build the cathedral. Your team needs a storeroom environment that they can respect and will maintain. They need high quality data going into the system so they can use it effectively. They need tools and technology that will make it easier to do their job. And they need the help of your key suppliers and partners along the way. You know, there seems to be something about our human nature that motivates us to treat well-kept spaces with more respect than poorly kept spaces. I mean, how many times have you walked into a poorly kept truck stop restroom and seen paper towels laying around the floor, water all over the countertops, and general filth everywhere you looked? Did you feel at all motivated to clean that restroom? Or did you just want to finish what you came in there for and get out of there? Now compare that to the very well-kept restroom in your favorite upscale restaurant. You know, the place where you take your spouse every year for your anniversary. The floor is spotless. The countertops are clear and dry, and it's even smells good in there. When you're done washing your hands, do you dry the countertop around the sink, or do you leave it soaking wet for the next guy? Do you put your paper towel in that little trash receptacle under the sink, or do you throw it on the floor? My point is this. Set up your storeroom in a way that will demand the respect of those who enter into it. Here are some examples of what this looks like in a well-managed storeroom. The floor and cabinet tops are clear of debris. The room is well lit. Every part has a place and every part is in its place. There are no mixed parts in bins. Aisles and shelves are well marked. There might even be signs denoting where certain commodity groups are. Every item is clearly labeled. All parts in stock are either new or repaired and ready to be installed. There are no used or cannibalized parts in stock. You know, in a well-kept storeroom, it's easier to do the right thing than the wrong thing. So I encourage you to start with a really solid physical setup. Inventory data is key. Without having high quality inventory data going into the system, your team is going to have great difficulty being successful. High quality inventory data is the basis for efficient item lookups, and it fuels the item labeling process, so you can even put a label on a part. At PM2, we recommend using a noun modifier and ranked attribute taxonomy to build standardized item descriptions. The graphic on this slide illustrates how our methodology, what it looks like and what an item description should look like based on that taxonomy. Other key fields include manufacturer name and manufacturer item number. Now, in my book, manufacturer name and item number are the holy grail for accurately sourcing and replenishing inventory items, as well as being able to fuel the ability to go out and source items from your key suppliers, to be able to give them good information to be able to give you price quotes back. Other key fields include bin location, potentially ABC codes, criticality codes if you have them, supplier information, maybe even bill of material information if you're that far down the road on a preventive maintenance program. The added benefit to you of having high quality inventory data going in is that you'll now be able to rely on the numbers that you see in the system, and you can make information-based decisions rather than feels-like decisions. So I really encourage you to look at the value of setting up a solid inventory database. Tools and technology are key as well. Without effective tools and technology, your business processes will likely be cumbersome, slow, and they probably won't be followed. Be sure to give your team the tools they need to manage the inventory as easily and effectively as possible. A reasonable investment here will come back to you in improved team productivity and reduced downtime. I encourage you to fully utilize the power of eMaint. Allow the team to embrace what eMaint can do for them, and you'll see their level of excitement and commitment grow exponentially exponentially. You know, I see a lot of cases where not just eMaint, but a lot of systems out there that they're running the system, but they're not using it anywhere near to its full capacity and capability. And there's such an opportunity to help the team be successful, to really maximize the power of the tool that you own. In a high-performance work team environment, the point of installing access control devices is aimed at keeping non-team members from disrupting the team's area, not policing the team. The team is going to take care of policing themselves in that environment. And lastly, you might consider utilizing other technologies such as RFID or automated retrieval systems as you see a good fit for your business. Enlisting partners is key. I put the graphic of the stones on the seesaw to illustrate the power of leverage and fully utilizing your key suppliers and partners. I would venture to guess that the majority of companies represented on the call today are buying their MRO supplies from upward of 100 vendors or maybe more. These wide and shallow supply bases evolve for various reasons. Some suppliers have good pricing. Some have good service or delivery. Some are long-time friends of ours. Some might even be relatives. The trouble with spreading your spend so thin across so many suppliers is that it dilutes your buying power and weakens your leverage significantly. I've recently worked with a large client who's whittled their entire supply base down to just 5 key suppliers from over 100. What did this buy them, you ask? Well, let me paint this picture for you. In this scenario, the client experienced significant price reductions across the board, but they also gained enough leverage to motivate these 5 key suppliers to work together as a team to provide a total inventory management solution for them across their 11 plants. This will include things like RFID technology, point-of-use vending, vendor-managed inventory, consignment, as well as a host of other value-added services not previously offered to this client. This stuff is groundbreaking and blue ocean, and I'm just really excited to follow this client's progress. So it's some of the most exciting developments I've seen in the marketplace in the last year to be able to use that kind of leverage to work with key partners to bring that kind of power to you. If you need help along the way, you know, of course, don't be too proud to ask for it. There are subject matter experts out there who can help you along the path. PM2 happens to be one such company. The 4th pillar of sustainability is Excel. Here's where the rubber meets the road for your team. This is where the team finds out how it's performing. Here are some of the key performance indicators I would recommend for starters. Number 1, user adoption rate. Are they fully committed to using the process and the tools? 2, inventory accuracy. That's the number 1 indicator of how consistently your inventory processes are being followed. Stockouts. Of course, stockouts have a direct impact on downtime, so those two are deeply related. So those are 4 very high-level basic recommendations that I would start measuring right away. And if you're the team sponsor, your number 1 role in all of this is to encourage and support the team and celebrate their successes publicly. Post the results in public for all to see. You might even consider initiating a Team Member of the Year award. At PM2, we call our Team Member of the Year award a PEMI. It's kind of a play on words for an Emmy. The acronym is spelled PMMMY, which stands for Professional Materials Management Member of the Year. Whatever you choose to do to recognize the team and its individual contributors, make it significant and meaningful. And be sure to make it fun. The effort that the team members will put forth will more than cover the cost of the award, trust me. Building a high-performance work team is your best chance for success, in my mind, for sustaining your MRO inventory environment. Realize that it'll take some upfront effort, But once your team gets up to speed, the power the team generates for your business will be amazing. You won't believe it. That's really all I have for today in this presentation. I hope you found it helpful and it inspires you to build your own high-performance work team. I appreciate you listening and taking the time out of your day today. Does anybody have any questions for me right now?
All right. Well, thank you, Dan. Thanks so much for putting that together, and there was definitely some things to be thinking about. And I would like to ask our listeners, just go ahead and type any questions that you have for Dan into the questions feature, and we'll address as many as we can. One listener is asking where the recorded version will be hosted, just so that if you'd like to revisit it and go back to it. And yes, we'll be sending all the attendees today an email once we render the recording, either later today or at the latest in the morning, with a link to the recording. And also, we'll make sure that Dan, I believe, has agreed to send out a PDF to our listeners, so you can also see his slide deck. But there was so much good information that he spoke about, I think you'll want to see the recording. And Dan, one question from a listener. Can you define MRO? I'll use that term throughout your presentation, but I don't think we gave a definition.
Oh, I apologize for that. MRO stands for Maintenance, Repair, and Operating Supplies. So these are the parts that you buy to maintain your facility or your production lines, typically.
Right. And in your experience, does it generally denote your spare parts inventory for the maintenance team separate from perhaps the inventory that's used in the production process?
Yeah. Spare parts and MRO can I think be used generally interchangeably. And so another way to think of it is MRO or spare parts would be you'd think of those as indirect inventory. That mean versus direct inventory that goes directly into the production of whatever you make.
Okay, very good. One listener is asking, you alluded to ABC, ABC codes and cycle counting during your talk, and they're asking if you can share a few best practices, Dan, from your experience regarding cycle counts.
Oh, sure. Specifically, cycle counts. You want to talk about ABC at all, too, or no?
Well, sure, if you feel they go hand in hand.
Okay, they do, in my opinion. And so the best practices I've seen are where you understand what your A, B, and C items are, and that is an A item is your fast-moving, highly active items that might move at least 4 times a year. Your B items would be less than 4 times a year. Your C items would be less than once a year or dead inventory. So then the strategy then around cycle counts is understanding that your A items probably represent 80% of the issues that you do day to day and week to week. Those are the ones you want to focus on first. So you might go count 20 or 30 A items a day. You may count 5 or 10 B items a day. You may only count 1 or 2 C items a day, because your goal is to try to focus on those items that are impacting your business most often, and that's going to be certainly your A items and getting into your B items as well.
Perfect. Okay. Can you define again for our listeners, used an abbreviation, I believe it was PMMY, and we had a listener ask if you could clarify what that meant.
Well, that's our little internal acronym, and it's actually it's P with 3 M's and a Y, so it's PMMMY, and it stands for Professional Materials Management Member of the Year. That's just our own little internal thing. We are we are trying to practice what we preach here in this presentation, and that's one way that we're attempting to do that.
Very good. We have another question here, and we have a listener asking, what particular criteria or guidance do you have in determining vendor-managed inventory? That was really it sounds like you had seen some pretty powerful results with vendor-managed and establishing key suppliers, and maybe you can share some criteria for what constitutes a good use case for going with vendor-managed inventory.
Okay, and I would say the immediate thought that comes to mind is try to focus on a broad line supplier or two, and I've seen cases where companies have attempted to have 5 or 10 different companies doing vendor-managed inventory, and that typically that has not gone well. It appears. It seems to me the more successful applications are they're dealing with 1 or 2 key providers, broad line providers that can provide, not just, for example, not just fasteners or not just, safety equipment or whatever. The point of that is you want to try to put as much incentive in the hands in the hands of that supplier to motivate them to not only give you good pricing from a leverage standpoint, but make it a good business case for them to be out there with regularity. The less you give a supplier of your spend, the harder it is for them to justify having their person out with reasonable frequency. They might try to come out only once every 2 weeks or so. The more you give a supplier, the more justification they have to have a presence out there more often for you. So that's what I would try to steer toward, going for those broad line suppliers and put large chunks of inventory in their hands. Now that's not to say that typically the type of inventory we're talking about is the lower dollar, higher moving inventory. It is things like PPE, safety equipment, gloves, safety glasses, small tools, fasteners, things like that don't necessarily need to be issued through your system. So those are the most typically the kinds of products that we're talking about that seem to be most successful in a vendor-managed inventory environment.
Great. And on a related note, you talked about the importance of key suppliers. And I was wondering, Dan, because we have many people who are first setting up a storeroom and, they're just starting to get their arms around their current inventory, and how do you identify which of your suppliers, if you're ordering parts across multiple sources, start to identify who are the key, where do you cut?
Well, most companies that we work with, if our starting point is where you're kind of needing to start from scratch, or you have very little from an inventory standpoint, you may not have inventory usage data, you may not have inventory on hand data, but you probably do have fairly decent purchasing data. You at least know what you're buying. And so a lot of times we'll start with the purchasing data to analyze how many suppliers are we buying from, and based upon what we know about these suppliers, what commodities do they represent, and what are the opportunities to say, hey, you're buying plumbing and fittings from 10 different suppliers, why is that? And start to have that conversation and go that way. Otherwise, you're kind of left with, the other approach would be to go ahead and set up the inventory and start to track usage, but that's going to take time, obviously. You need probably 6 months at least of time to track what I have and what I use. So if you're starting from scratch, I would start with the purchasing data first and try to make some headway that way.
Excellent. I'm sure this listener is not alone in asking this question, but how do you interface when you have a team and you're trying to reestablish store's process and right-size your inventory, and you have a financial or corporate team that wants to cut down on stock, and there's that constant dynamic, and how do you help sort of bridge that gap, Dan, in your experience, so that the two teams are working with one goal?
Yeah, this gets into the kind of the philosophical end of this conversation today. It's if you're able to help the team understand the vision and the impact on the business overall, and try to take your focus off your I'll use the word silo, your area, your corner of the business. And the most typical example there is, I'm a maintenance technician, and all I care about is making sure that the machines are running, and there is no part that's not a critical spare. They're all critical. And that's the mindset that we hear many times. And so trying to educate that team and those individuals to understand what is the total impact to the business of those decisions. So that's a more than a 5-minute conversation. I think.
True.
That's a process. I think that's a change of a culture, because there is a lot of kind of corporate management versus local management. It's we want to try to get on the same page, but that doesn't always happen in one day.
And as I recall, Dan, that was the topic of an entire webinar that we did quite a while ago that maybe we'll want to revisit, on how you quantify the financial impact, the different financial ramifications of these different inventory management philosophies that could help.
That's right.
We also had someone ask, oh my, there are so many, I'm going to try to get to all of these. Can you define, in your experience, Dan, what you consider good, better, or great for inventory accuracy levels? So for those that are setting up those vision and goals, what's considered a good number, and then what's sort of the gold standard that people want to hope to achieve?
Okay, I would say the gold standard is 99% plus. That isn't a reality for a lot of people on the phone here today. I think a reasonable starting point is in the 90 to 95% range, and once you have your processes, you begin to dial in your processes, and you have a solid cycle count process in place, then you should be able to expect 98, 99% accuracy. But you got to start somewhere. So I think an initial goal, if you set the bar obviously at 99% and you're just brand new at this process, you're going to be beating yourself up, for failing, and we don't want that. We want success, and so set the bar at an achievable percentage, celebrate a success, and then raise the bar when you see that you've had some success and consistency in the process.
Great. I think we have some listeners that are kind of just getting their arms around entering data into a system, and maybe just establishing a database for the first time. So do you have some a good rule of thumb for establishing min and max levels in good inventory management processes?
Typically what I recommend in the case where it sounds like where these questions are emanating from is, we're kind of starting from, the beginning. Mm-hmm. And so we really have no usage information. We might have, we certainly probably have tribal information, experienced people in the business that understand. They can walk down the aisle and see that this part is a critical spare. They know that to be true. So there's really two things I would do. The number one thing I would do is would be to bring your experienced people through the storeroom and tag your critical spares. That's number one. And of course, you've got to define what critical spare means to you as a company and agree upon that. Once you've done that, I'd tag the critical spares. That's the first thing I would do. In the case where you don't have usage information or any kind of data or history to make a min-max decision on, what I recommend is just setting your reorder point at one less than your current on hand. What that's going to do and you do that for 3 months. And for 3 months, what it's going to do is as soon as you issue a part, you're going to replenish that part. And then 3 months goes by and you look at your usage and you make an adjustment. And then at the 6-month mark, do it again. And so over time, the strategy is here, we don't want to just arbitrarily guess at min-maxes and risk putting your plant down over an inaccurate guess. So let's begin to track inventory. Let's start to dial down the min-maxes over time and do it in a phased approach. It would be my recommendation.
Perfect. All right, we have time for a couple more questions here. I'm going to filter through. We had one listener ask if you could define RFID, and another say, could you also, you alluded to that was something that can have a positive impact, and can you have some best practices that you can share regarding the use of barcoding RFID and these other tools that can, when it comes to managing MRO?
Okay. RFID stands for radio frequency identification. So the technology is, and I won't get too deep into it, but there's called active and passive tags. Probably the more common tag is a passive tag, and essentially it's, if you could liken it to going into a retail store and there's a tag on that piece of merchandise, and if you walk out through the door and you didn't pay for it, the system, the alarm goes off. So that's a similar technology. So the value in that is if you have a process on the front end that you're tagging, putting an RFID tag on each piece, and this could potentially be your vendor helping in this. As I alluded to, where you have a team of 5 vendors teaming up to do things of this nature. So now envision the inventory all has RFID tags on them, and there's a portal or an RFID antenna near a door. You come in, you tag I should say you badge in, let's say, to the storeroom so the system knows who came in, and you tell the system which work order maybe that you're working on. You go find your part, and you walk out with that part, and the system knows that you took the part, how many you took, based upon how many tags went through went by the antenna, and associates those parts with the work order and the fact that you took them. So wow. The potential is really exciting. The front end, I'll say the setup and the tagging process, it's where do you want to do the work? Do you want to do the work on the front end and tag it, or do you want to do your work on the tail end of the process by issuing out of a system somehow? So, RFID is not for everyone, but in the right application, it can be very exciting. Another way that you can apply it is you could put RFID tags in a drawer cabinet, and this applies very directly to FOD in the aerospace industry, foreign object detection. And if you have a cabinet full of tools that all have RFID tags on them, and any one of those tools is missing at the end of the day, the system knows it immediately. And you need to go find your crescent wrench and pull it out of that aircraft you were just working on. So a lot of very interesting, neat applications in the right if it's the right fit for you.
All right, I think we'll take one more, Dan, before we wrap. And you mentioned the importance of and the benefits of having vendors manage your inventory. But one listener is just a little concerned about the oversight in order to, I guess there has to be a level of trust, but also to make sure that there's good checks and balances when you are having an external party manage your inventory. So any recommendations on how you oversee that process and make sure that it's being managed most effectively and that you are, managing any potential abuse?
Right, and I guess the first thought I would offer is that whichever supplier you choose to help you with vendor managed inventory, my first question would be, how is the person incented when he comes on site to restock your bins? And what I mean by that is there are some that are paid a commission on how sizable an order they write. And so they are incented to overfill your bins, financially incented. I would be asking the question, I want the person who's paid a flat hourly rate or a straight salary to just provide a service, and that is their only incentive, to provide a valuable service. They're not compensated for how large of an order they write for you every time they come out. So that's the first thing I would make sure to separate the suppliers based on what incentive their people have when they come out on site. Secondly is you would never just give complete free rein and have a supplier just provide a bunch of product and send you a summarized invoice for them. You always want to have a proposed replenishment list that someone on your side reviews and says, these are the 50 items that we recommend replenishing today. Do you agree? Yes or no? And then you sign off and you have that level of control and oversight, so these parts aren't just showing up without anybody watching on the front end. On the back end, I would say most of the items that are going to be vendor managed will probably fall into the category of either free issue items or low dollar high use items or point of use items. So you'll want to just decide how much of those items, how many of those items are you going to include in your cycle count process. On the higher dollar items, the higher use, maybe safety equipment, things like that, I would count those every once in a while, and that's a way to drive accountability as well with your vendors.
Perfect. Well, I'm sorry that we still have the questions coming in, but we have run out of time, and I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. But I do invite our listeners to continue the dialogue. Dan is also going to be one of our partners. It's at the Accelerate conference. So for those of our listeners that are considering attending or planning to attend, we encourage you to continue the dialogue. And Dan will have a presence there. He'll be there throughout the conference, and he'll also be sharing the slides, and we encourage you to keep the dialogue going. And again, we'd like our listeners, thank you, Dan, for putting this together, and thanks all our listeners for your questions. We want to make sure our goal is to help you guys be successful and provide you with the tools and the knowledge that you need to do so. So please take a moment when the webinar is done and let us know how we did and what other topics there might be that we can ask such knowledgeable guests such as Dan to present. So again, thank you to everyone, and thank you, Dan. Thank you to our listeners, and hopefully we'll see you at Accelerate, Dan, and we'll see you all the next time. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.